Buenos dias, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday, April 13th. As I've stated earlier this week, I'm in Phoenix today and tomorrow, enjoying the warm weather. Here is what you are doing today. Wednesday, the 13th, you have a DBQ to answer, and then you'll follow a lecture here and get some notes down. The rest of the time is spent on two things. One, getting any missing work turned in, as you have a deadline that is at 3:20 tomorrow, Thursday, the 14th. Or getting ready for your exam, which is also tomorrow, the 14th. I have decided to allow you to use a note card for your exam. If you would like to fill out or complete both sides of a 3x5 note card, you may do so. There is a stack on my desk that you are able to enjoy. Just ask the guest teacher and you should be all set. So DBQ, lecture, and then you have note cards or missing work to do tomorrow, exam, current events, quiz, and back to your missing work, which some of you do have quite a significant amount of missing assignments. Again, we've done this before. If I tell you to stop and go and do something, obviously pause the video and go and do something. That way you don't have to, keep reopening things or fast forwarding or whatnot. First thing that we are doing today is looking at a DBQ regarding the Latin American revolutions. We've spent the last week and a half talking about the French Revolution. Whilst the French Revolution was occurring, the Latin American revolutions, or at least the foundation of such, were also occurring. So we're going to almost be covering a parallel period of time to what was going on in Europe. The document, we see here a cartoon from the time period. The directions ask you to think about the message of the illustration, right? There's clearly a message here with the positioning of European monarchies, Uncle Sam, and what looks to be Latin American people behind him. What is the message that's being conveyed here? And then why do you think the United States must perform this role? Again, if you did the reading previously, you should be able to understand this. Go ahead, pause the video, respond to this question, and then we're done. Come on back in. Excellent, excellent, excellent. We'll come back to this cartoon here near the end of the lecture. Go ahead, grab your reading guides for chapter 24.2 or your notes, whatever you're getting this information down, but we need to double check that we have this so we don't jack up our test tomorrow. Again, I've already said this, while revolution was occurring in France and why conflict was occurring throughout Europe because of the revolution in France, the foundation for what would be occurring in Latin America, Mexico, Central America, South America was all occurring near the same time. The reason why the Latin American countries will fight for their independence or be moved to fight for their independence is because they're exposed to the ideas that are occurring in the American Revolution in the 1770s, and they're exposed to the ideas that are occurring in France during their revolutions, plural, the end of the 1700s and the first few decades, couple decades of the 19th century, the 1800s. On top of that, all right, on top of those ideas of revolution and freedom in those two countries, we also need to go back to this concept as to why the French Revolution occurred. Industrialization, economic evolution, just like in France where you had the bourgeois, that wealthy middle class, be able to set itself apart from the rest of society economically, but yet have no political ability whatsoever. The same concepts apply to South America. South American colonies or New World colonies controlled by the Europeans were broken into the same class, regardless of who was the possessor. The same rules are going to apply to the British, it's the French, it's the Spanish, it's the Portuguese. There's peninsulares. Those are going to be European-born colonists. You're born in Europe, you move to the New World, you own land, you're a peninsularis, you're a European-born colonist. Creole, a Creole is going to be a New World-born white European. Peninsularis are white, they're born in Europe. Creole, they're European, they're born in the New World. These two groups, these two social castes, if you will, these are going to be the reason, or this is going to be the reason why revolution will happen in the New World. These people will largely be able to acquire a significant amount of wealth, yet they'll have no political power whatsoever. They very much are the bourgeois of Latin American revolutions. They have wealth, but yet they have no political power. Underneath the peninsulares and the Creole, you have mestizos. This is a topic we've discussed before. Mestizos are going to be biracial people. They're going to be of mixed ancestry between the native population and Europeans. Mulatto would be underneath that. Again, biracial people, mixed ancestry of Europeans and Africans. And then at the bottom, you have Africans and the Indians, or the indigenous populations. All right, so that is the order of the societal castes in Latin America. Again, what's important to stress here, what will drive the revolution in Latin America on top of these ideas from America and the French are the fact that the Peninsulares and the Creole are able to make money, but they have no political power whatsoever. The last influence, the last cause of these revolutions, French and the Americans, societal disruption. The last cause is going to be this, see you boys, the last cause is going to be the European countries who are involved in all of these wars, whether it be a religious war, whether it be fighting the French or fighting for the throne of one country, it doesn't really matter. Or if it's fighting Napoleon, it's irrelevant. What these European countries are going to do as their population increases and inflation increases is they are going to go to war. And they are going to use the New World, they're going to use their colonies to more or less make up the difference for what their country does not have. Oops, went too far here. Okay. Spain is a perfect example. The British, when you talked about the American Revolution, perfect examples. They more or less extorted their colonies for wealth, both money and resources, to pay for their wars. Taxation without representation was a battle cry of the American Revolution. The same thing will happen with Spain. The same thing will happen with the French colonies. Same will happen with the Portuguese. They used the monarchies of Europe more or less extorted the colonists, very much like the first and second estates extorted the third estate. That'll be another cause. There's going to be some major players in these revolutions. Simon Bolivar, the reason why South America has a country, Bolivia. Simon Bolivar is going to be a major player in the freedom, the liberation of South America. He will lead revolutions in the northern part of South America, what will eventually become modern day Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela. That'll be as a result of Simon Bolivar's movements. Haiti, the island of Haiti, it's the first Latin American country to gain its independence. I think your book refers to it as Saint Domingue. It's present day Haiti. It'll be the same thing there. The white population does not like the fact that the French are extorting them to pay for wars. They will seek their rebellion, or they will seek their independence. Their independence will change when the mulattoes ask for more or less equality amongst the handful of white Frenchmen who live there. When they are denied because they are biracial, the Haitian Revolution will actually become a slave rebellion. That island will be dominated by former slaves that are freed by the mulattoes. But again, it comes to the same concept of extortion by European countries. The Napoleonic Wars, all right, wreak havoc on Latin American countries because Spain, French, all right, the British, doesn't really matter. These European colonial powers use their colonies to make up the difference. Mexico will start pushing for revolution. Central America will push for revolution. The other major player of revolution in South America is a guy named San Martin. he works largely in the western regions of South America. Argentina's on the east side, but south and western side of South America, Argentina, Chile, Peru, again, and it's the same causes. They get the idea of revolution. They get the idea of nationalism, which we'll be talking about again here shortly in the next unit. This idea that, we as a people, we are a thing, we have value, right? We have an identity. We shouldn't, we're no different than anybody else. We shouldn't be possessed or controlled by anybody else. And then you have the strain that's put on these colonial people to cover the wars. All right. And again, largely the idea of revolution will be carried out by the Peninsulares and the Creole people. Portugal's revolution is going to be a little bit different. I said Portugal, but I meant to say Brazil. Brazil's revolution will be a little bit different than the other South American countries. This is actually going to be a family thing that goes down. When the Spanish controlled Portugal, the royal family more or less fled. Then when Napoleon comes around and there's chaos in the Iberian Peninsula, what actually happens is the Damjau family, who had fled to Brazil, actually returns. The father returns to take control of Portugal. And that's really when Brazil's independence comes, is when the dad goes back, the son more or less is convinced to liberate, it's really raining out there, to liberate Brazil from the Portuguese. So Brazil's liberation is a touch different. But make no mistake about it, you still have some of the same concepts there, right? You have revolutions that have occurred, this concept of the lower classes being treated with equality. You have the concept of people being born in the colonies, being mistreated by people in Europe, all still there. And again, you're still going to have the extortion of European countries exploiting South American countries for resources and wealth. I mean, you cannot deny the fact that Portugal, after fighting the Spanish and having to deal with Napoleon, wasn't going to be taking some sort of financial toll on their colony in the New World. Lastly, we'll talk about the Monroe Doctrine. Okay. We have talked repeatedly when it comes to revolution. For democratic purposes, usually a dictatorship results. Usually there is a failure in revolution. Really, the United States is the only country that had a successful revolution, and even then it almost failed because of the Articles of Confederation. The Latin American Revolution was piecemeal. It was country by country. All right, it wasn't just one big war all at once. It was piecemeal. It was piecemeal because there's different groups of people in different places. This is problematic for Latin American freedom because it was so diversified and piecemeal, one part at a time. It was very difficult to keep the Latin American people united, and not just country by country, right? Where we're talking within that country, within a small region, there was still greater diversity. If we were to go back and look at the social classes of these colonies, you still had your Peninsulares, your Creole, Mestizos, mulattoes. And an example, Haiti. Haiti's a perfect example of this. You had the white Frenchmen rebel against Napoleon. And then they lost the control of their rebellion when they couldn't satisfy the mulattoes and the Africans, the freed former slaves. They took over, right? That's within one country. That's really what we're talking about here. On top of each individual country here fighting for its independence within that country, there's a bunch of different people. So unity was a big issue. Okay, unity was a huge issue. And the United States were worried. The United States were eventually become worried that if these revolutions fail, if these new liberated countries failed, that European countries would continue to come back over here. And the United States eventually realized that this was an issue, because if these European countries are able to take over former colonies in South America, Central America, or Mexico, then what's stopping them from taking over or regaining control of North America, where the United States is. So in the 1820s, President Monroe issued something called the Monroe Doctrine, and don't make it any more fancy than it needs to be. He made a statement, basically said that the United States is in control of the Western Hemisphere. You deal with what you need to deal with in Europe. If you still have a colonial possession here, fine and dandy. You're welcome to take your trip across the Atlantic. But if you don't have any possessions here, if you're not in control of anything in here, over here anymore, then you're not welcome to come back and start sniffing around our business. And any act of doing such would result in more or less a declaration of war from the United States, which is kind of a bold move. His mouth here is really writing a check that his butt can't cash, because there's a lot more military power in Europe amongst these countries, especially like the British, than there is in the United States. Again, a country that's really only been around for 76, they ended in 81, so we're looking at about 40 years. It's a bold move, Cotton. But the Monroe Doctrine is this kind of reassurance that European countries aren't going to come over. And it really worked out for our advantage, because it really wasn't a deterrent whatsoever. But Europe was so jacked up because of Napoleon in the 1800s that they really didn't have time to come over here and sniff around. But it also kind of lays this precedence for the United States to be involved in Latin America. And from the 1820s, quite literally all the way up through today. I mean, we still are doing covert actions in Central America, the Caribbean islands, South America, especially when it comes to things like drug cartels. The United States has a presence in this region. The United States would step in and more or less replace the Europeans as the big extortionist of what's going on here. South America, Latin America, Mexico, Central America, South America, the Caribbean islands, they will go through a series of revolutions. Their first revolution is getting rid of Europeans. Their next revolution will undoubtedly be a little dabble with socialism and communism. And then more recently, they'll go through another revolution where they get rid of socialism and communism and kind of switch to capitalism. But the point that I'm saying, why I'm bringing this up, is that the United States is largely the driver of these revolutions. The Europeans get kicked out. Sooner or later, American businesses will sneak in. Things like United Fruit Company, okay, or Chiquita, will sneak into these countries, open up business, and slowly take control. Those companies will extort the people in these countries. The United States will help impose dictators in these countries and keep them in power as long as they give us favorable trade contracts. That'll bring about communism, which we already know how the Cold War goes. These people will dabble with communism. The United States will begin carrying out covert measures, usually through the CIA, and a series of conflicts referred to or largely grouped in with as the Banana Wars, where we're trying to overthrow communist governments and put friendly American governments back in. All the way up to today, where, I mean, a lot of these countries are pretty war torn, and we're still dealing with it. All right. So again, just to recap here, the ideas of revolution from the United States, from French, spread all around the world. From France, spread all around the world. That is a major driver in Latin American countries. This idea of nationalism. We as a people are good. We as a people should be independent. We should govern ourselves. Don't need somebody else. There's the other concept of the Peninsulares, or the Creole, the white Europeans, either born there or here, who are being oppressed by the French or European countries to pay for their wars, to pay for their conflicts. They have money, the Peninsulares, and Creole. Why don't they have political power? They'll largely drive this revolution throughout the region, right? A lot of the revolution will be led by people like Simon Bolivar or San Martin. But there will be some special cases, some unique cases where, it is led by who are higher up in the social system, who are led by slaves, right? Toussaint Louverture would be a perfect example in Haiti. And again, once the major thing here is once the Europeans are kicked out, the United States will come in, and South America will have to go through this whole process again, largely beginning with Monroe Doctrine, which is now 200 years ago, In these South American countries, Caribbean countries, Central American countries, Mexico, they're still dealing with influence from the United States, as we, have asserted our control over the entire Western Hemisphere. That is what I have for you today to get down. A reading guide should get turned in. You have missing work to do. It's due at 3:20 tomorrow. You have a note card you can be filling out for your exam. Exam is like 70 points, 75 points. No cards are on my desk. You can work on them. Tomorrow, test, current events quiz. They will lock at the end of the period. And then again, you have whatever time left to work on your missing assignments. Good luck on your test. Have a great rest of the week. Happy Easter for those who celebrate, Passover for those who did that, and for those who are still celebrating Ramadan, enjoy, and I will see you guys on Monday. Go Spartans.